Hello and welcome to Truth and Transparency. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for the members, subscribers, and also those amazing mods. Thank you guys for being here. Love that you're here for it. I'm here for it.
Yes, it's my job to determine the manner and mechanism of death.
On the other hand, I just was numb.
You expected him to be a bigger monster and a more intimidating.
I mean, I'm like, this is the guy?
Yeah.
This is the guy that murdered our daughter.
Are you going to be okay with continuing these court hearings? Are you going to show up at all of these court hearings? This is a lot. It's a lot to process. Before this, you were just parents of a, couple of really great kids and living the American dream. And now there's this new normal in your life.
I think we'll lean on the prosecutor to tell us if the information is going to be to a level. Like I've already told them what I'm comfortable with hearing about the family has. I don't want to hear any of the gory details. So there'll be certain days that we're there and certain days that we check out,
We have Shannon that will keep us in tune with that as well. And we have other family members that will be going on some of those harder days. They feel that they can be there because we know it's a long road, but and it's a drive for us, but we'll do it every day if we have to. We just don't want to do big bad details.
There's there on the screen. There are pictures of Kaylee as you're talking, and I'm always struck by how much she looks like you. Absolutely stunning.
You.
Just such a beautiful girl. Indeed.
Yeah, we didn't look like that. Mama's girl.
She looks like you, Steve. She's got some of you too. I just wanted to get a sense from you about justice. What is it? What does it look like for you? I mean, you're just starting this process.
For me, it's going to look a lot like an end I mean, justice doesn't have a room where you can read books and you can go to school and you can have, 3 meals and you can have your vegan diet. To me, that's not justice. Justice is when you leave the planet and the whole world is able to rejoice and be glad that you are not there. That's justice, and we will forgive him. We will. We're not going to have that heavy weight on us. We will forgive this individual, and we will, but he has to pay for what he's done. And it's not just our daughter, it's all the victims he needs to pay justice to. And, that's all I can say about it.
Yeah.
Chrissy, it's always a shock to face the person who's alleged to have committed these horrendous acts and changed your lives forever. If you could say something to this person, what would you say?
I would just, I wouldn't want to give him too much. But I mean, I would tell him that, he destroyed our lives in an aspect. Does he realize what he has taken from us, from these 4 families? I mean, Ethan was a triplet. Maddie was an only child. Xana had siblings. Kaylee was one of 5. She was the middle child. She had 2 older siblings, 2 younger siblings. Just the immense loss. I mean, did he really think? I mean, he did really think about it, which makes it really hard. But why?
And I would add to that if you were looking for cruel girls that were bullies to you through your life when you were struggling, you picked the wrong girls. My girls have been through a lot, and they weren't the ones to pick on somebody that because they were overweight or they were struggling and people weren't. They were actually the ones to stick up for you. So yeah, you picked the wrong person if you were looking for vengeance on some people that were mean to you in your life, and you picked the wrong community. And we're gonna have to hold you accountable for that mistake.
Speaking of that accountability, has the prosecution or anybody from the prosecutor's office discussed the option of a death penalty? Because victims' families are consulted typically throughout the process, and this is an option on the table in the state of Idaho.
We've talked with them. We've had multiple meetings. I think they probably want to do it all the families together before they just approach one. That would make the most sense. But we've had meetings, but we have not crossed that actual
Question.
Yeah, I mean, they couldn't even disclose just until recently that they were this close. They kind of said that, hey, give us some time. We think we have the right person. We're going to get this. But we couldn't go from that to death penalty or those type of details.
Do you both have a feeling as to how you would respond to that question once the prosecutors put it to you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we know.
We're glad that we live in
And that
Idaho.
is,
Definitely.
I'm assuming that
Definitely.
you are in favor of the death penalty
Yeah.
for this
Absolutely.
defendant.
If our daughters could switch places with him, and I'm saying Maddie is my daughter, we'd do it in a heartbeat. If they could sit there and have 3 squares, a place to live, and we could call them, we could write
Yeah.
them letters, they could watch TV, they could get
I
educated.
would love if Maddie and Kaylee were doing life in prison right now.
Yeah, so
At least we could talk to them.
that's not
They'd be breathing.
a punishment equivalent to being killed. That's God's role. And if you want to play
Do you know
God's
if-
role, then you're gonna have to go answer to him.
Do you know if the Mogan family feels the same way? I know you all are very close with the Mogans.
We have not talked to them about that. I was going to call her last night, and I did not. So I'm not sure.
Easy to talk about.
I'm not sure, but I have a feeling that that they will, but I can't say that for sure.
They're very
I wanna
forgiving
ask,
and family.
It's incredible to hear the words forgiveness out of your mouth, Steve. It floors me. It's extraordinarily magnanimous. You're a very strong family if you're able to be there today, especially on day one of this process, seeing him for the first time. I would love to ask your attorney, Shannon Gray, if I can. Shannon, was there anything in the affidavit you didn't already know about? Are there things that you know more about than the public knows now?
Well, I think there were a lot of things in the affidavit that we had no idea about. The DNA and the sheath, we had suspected some things. The identification, I think we had suspected, but there were a lot of things that.
The identification we suspected. DNA, sheath, nope. The identification.
And Shannon, was there anything in the affidavit you didn't already know about? Are there things that you know more about than the public knows now?
Well, I think there were a lot of things in the affidavit that we had no idea about. The DNA and the sheath, we had suspected some things. The identification, I think we had suspected. But there were a lot of things that, there was quite a bit of information in that affidavit. I was actually surprised there was so much information in the affidavit. But it looks like it's a solid case. And, I kind of look at the case in two different ways. As a former prosecutor, I look at it as a prosecution case, and it looks like a solid case. And then I flip the hat and I say, okay, as a criminal defense attorney, how would I look at it? And I still have a hard time with the evidence that's been mentioned in the affidavit. And that's not the entire case. There'll be additional circumstantial evidence that'll be provided that will make more connections, hopefully, with the defendant in the case. And like they've always said, it's not just a arrest, it's a conviction. So we're hoping that that's the case.
Steve and Christy, when we covered the tragedy that befell Gabby Petito, her father, Joe Petito, said that there were some lessons that he learned very early in the process, and that was to pay particular attention to your other kids because they are going through an immeasurable trauma. Have you had a chance to navigate this with your other kids, with Kaylee's siblings, and have you charted a course forward?
Yes, we have our two are adults and they are grown, and we have talked to them, and they know, they can reach out to grief counseling and whatnot. And we are very open and we talk a lot about it. We cry a lot about it. And that's not always enough. But our two younger children, right now we're kind of letting them do their own grieving for a little while longer before we start some grief counseling with the church. They have some great people for us to reach out to, and we plan on reaching out to them. I've been talking to the pastor on a daily basis, and he has some really good, they go through grief counseling himself as the pastor, and he has a team like for teens and whatnot. And he feels that they are like the best, and I trust him. He's a great man, and he's got us through a lot here lately. And we feel that we just don't want to throw it on them, because right now they're like, no, we don't need that. But I don't see how they cannot not need that. They're young, and they're heartbroken, and they're confused.
Yeah, this is their friend and sister.
Yeah.
And
so,
Maddie
unfortunately,
as well, right?
Yes.
I would assume that Kaylee's siblings were very close with Maddie as well. This is a tremendous amount of burden to try to process for them.
Yeah,
Maddie was very kind and had been a sister to them for so long that it was just, we took for granted that she was there and that she would always be there. So yeah, it hits everybody a little bit different, and you have certain memories that you tie to certain individuals. So it's my girls miss them both, and my son is torn. It's something we're gonna have to work together. We're not very good at this kind of stuff, but we're gonna have to figure it out.
Yeah, we're not. And
Okay. So per the sources of the kids in Idaho, students, fellow Greek members, fellow friends of the victims, people's phones, this has now been brought to me from the anonymous sources from students at the university, that yes, phones started going off at 9:30 a.m. So at 9:30 a.m., there was, so I'm gonna put this down here for you guys. Like the messages began on phones about incident. Okay. Let's see. Again, this is not coming from WSU Kim. This is coming from the Idaho students. Now, the title here of this live is about, kids in school, in colleges, they will dabble in stuff, whether it goes as like even drinking, if a kid didn't, drink any time in high school, to trying party drugs, which is like, I'm not one to sit here and tell you all about drugs because I don't know all about drugs. That was never my thing. But let's just say that I've taken the time to research. There is a difference between like a party drug and someone that's just like waking up, being addicted to drugs and living a life like that. But to the students, the University of Idaho campus, the sources, they know who Emma Bailey is. They know who Demetrius Robinson is. Everybody calls him D. And there are connections. And those connections I'm going to talk about here today. Again, like I said, I have a marathon of a live schedule. It's going to be 2 parts. The morning session here is quicker with running down research and information from students that want to be anonymous. I did my vetting to prove that they are in fact students at the University of Idaho and some in the Greek life. I don't blame them one bit to wanting to they want to speak out, but they also want to be anonymous. And I think that everybody could see why. And if you can't, then that's fine, but we're going to respect their wishes. The big thing that's been on everybody's mind lately is about drugs. And with Caden Young's death, and then the arrest of Emma Bailey and Demetrius Robinson. Demetrius Robinson has a couple brothers, but he has a really, really long rap sheet, okay? And you can only just look at what you see with the papers as well as the court documents to see that there's involvement with alleged drugs as well as physical violence. He has that. But when I feature the students that are going to come on here, they're going to be showing us some places that nobody wants to talk about. We're going to be using Google Earth, Google Maps. So at that point, when it comes on, just we're sharing screens and stuff like that. Be prepared for that. That's going to happen a little bit later. And then going into like Sunday's show. So we're going to be showing the grub truck and the routes everyone would take to walk home, where people would go, and then how close the SEPTA apartments are to Pullman. So we're going to show a bunch of different things. There's a lot of places that are sus to like reporters and they don't like filming there. So we're going to try to show those areas. No frat on campus has security cameras, in case you guys did not know. The sororities do, though. I asked, my number one question that I wanted to know was who, you hear the name Brian Koberger when you hear the arrest, then you got everybody asking each other, that question, which is who's Brian Koberger? Have you ever heard of Brian Koberger? So that was my number one. That was my number one question, which is, had you ever heard this name before, and had you ever seen this person? And it was a unanimous, nope, not one of us knows the guy. The closest that somebody can come forward saying is that it is a guy dated a chick who had him as a TA, but nobody could ever provide proof of that. When people are asking questions around there, when you start talking about it, as far as students, people get looked at weird. People get looked at like, why are you asking questions? Like, you're weird for wondering anything after they caught the guy, allegedly. So again, I think that's a pretty big thing here, is that Brian Koberger was never seen by any, you got the Greek, community talking about things when this arrest was made. And nobody could come forward in this group to say, I've seen Brian Koberger, I know who he is, and speak upon him, as far as what my sources have revealed to me. And that was a big part of what I wanted to know. Again, you're going to be able to hear a lot of this from their own voices. A lot of these kids have a lot to say about Emma. And I think that they want to speak on that because of the death of Caden Young with the drugs. According to them, Emma was huge into selling drugs. And according to them, the people that were included in that was Xana. And it was more, not this past year, but the year before. And these people admitted to me that Xana had sold to us all last year. She was friends with, Emma goes by M. But it was more like a hobby to them. It wasn't like or how it portrayed wasn't some crazy drug operation ring. It was more of like a hobby, is how it was described. What was says that there was 3 girls, and I'm going to leave those names off right now, but everything was done like low key style. But the person's product that it was, everybody is saying that it was this Demetrius's product, this D's product. And that's who was arrested with Emma Bailey in connection with delivering the illegal substance to Caden Young, who, now we're going to get into that a little bit later today, which is the route and this party where they would have been in Seattle, because then where Caden Young was found was an hour and 30 minutes away from Seattle at these apartments, the 3,000 block Borst. It was like an hour and 20 minutes away from allegedly being partying down in Seattle. So I'm going to show that a little bit. We're going to show the connections of who people are friends with, and how this all traces back to what people were in. Like, these students, when they were being told stuff at 9:30 in the morning to like 9:30, 10, 10:30, 11, 11:30, because they're all talking about on the night or on the morning of when they found out about the murders, people were in range from that. It looked like it was a shooting because it just That's the first thing people think of when you see a scene like that, I guess, is the best way that was described. But then also there was talks about like people overdosing and then covering up an overdose. Again, I'm going to let people speak in their own words to stuff like that. I'm just more or less giving you guys a summary of what's going to be coming up here today and tomorrow with this live streaming of marathon of the Idaho4 case. I want to know more about the Caden Young death because I wanted to know if it had anything to do with when I was researching Caden Young. He wrote for the school paper, and I was just curious if, he was looking into the 1122 King homicides. And what came back, was that Caden was out in Seattle, and one of his friends had just moved out to that area. And everything that's going on with that investigation, it has everybody that was around it scared. It has a lot of people scared because of what was put out in the papers about somebody setting up to try to get, this drug, basically try to get Emma to redeal the drugs. And then Emma wrote back saying, no, she wasn't going to do that. Well, Emma knows who this person is, obviously, that tried to set up this deal. Then it was written in the papers like that. So don't you think that person's going to be like, what the heck? These people know who I am. And so it's putting people in fear of okay, are Demetrius's, goons going to come after this kid? And when you actually think about it from that standpoint, that kid should be scared. Should I be scared if that got into the papers that we set up a fake drug buy to bust these people? But here Emma Bailey was saying, no, we're not going to, you guys, I don't know if you guys have seen the quotes. Again, I'm going to go into this a little bit more later and tomorrow about the newspaper reporting or reporters reporting about that there was a task force that went ahead and set up this, well, here we want you to buy, get Emma, message her on social media, use your social media contacts, and message her to try to get another score of drugs. So obviously then what happens, she makes some comments saying he basically died in Dee's arms last night. Like he needs to get healthy. We're not, I don't know if Emma gave enough away with any of that or how that played out. But from what I was being told by my sources is that Demetrius and Emma and whoever they were with, they performed CPR on Caden Young, and they were able to, they thought was save his life because obviously he went to the Harbor View Medical Center where he was discharged and fine at 2:00 in the morning, only to be picked up by a friend and then drove, like I said, a pretty decent ways away from what the authorities put in the paper. And that's where he was then found around a little after 9:00 in the morning when 911 was called, when the kid stopped breathing. And then Caden Young was pronounced dead. Okay. So again, some of the stuff I'm leaving and holding back because I want the story that people have to tell. I want them to tell it. It's their story. But then I went back to talking about, okay, the 1122 King house and the people that live there. prior to this year, Maddie lived in that house with Kendra, who I did an episode about, started working out like crazy, and it looked like she was taking something. Ashlyn Couch, what was it? Ruby. Who else am I missing? There's a couple other girls. Sophie, I think, was in there. But Maddie was living in this house, the 1122 King house, the year before, which would be her junior year, okay, with two people that are friends with Emma Bailey, and that was be Kendra and Ashlyn. So much so that they, yes, social media, they follow each other, they like each other's posts, things like that. And so I asked these sources about the Emma Bailey Connect to the 1122 King Road house because of what the police said when they originally said, well, we don't know if somebody was targeted or if the house was targeted. So if you think somebody may live somewhere, you don't realize that they moved. Could that be maybe why the house was the target? Again, I'm just thinking about anything and everything that's possible. So I wanted to know about, was drugs a thing at the 1122 King Road? Like heavy selling? Was it just a place that people knew that they can go and party and you'd be able to score those drugs and be able to hang out and do them, you know? And something that I found was interesting, which was that Emma always came to them, meaning they never had to go anywhere. Okay. They would just show up, drop off the stuff, or hang out for a little bit, and then head off to the next. But since Emma was friends and with some of those people, they would then like come back and go back and like party with them and stuff like that over where the King Road house is. Because there's those other houses that are right by the 1122 King house. If you guys are watching the body cams that we're putting out, those houses are like on top of each other. And those houses, they all know each other and they'll bounce back and forth from house to house. Okay. So, again, it was mainly, Emma was running the stuff around. Dee was only here once in a blue moon, they said. Em would bring some girls or the new bang buddy with her. And, we'd all just chill and get fucked up together. When this one time when they came over, they had this medical eye drop looking shit. And it was Coke in a bottle. She was slapping it in anyone's nose who asked. I had to make a big deal about not liking water in my nose because I did not trust that fucking shit. Allegedly, Emma was into some crazy ass shit. And it all came from Dee. And she was dating Dee on and off throughout the last year. And then I was curious about we've all watched the DUI arrest, okay? And I was curious about, Emma seemed pretty stupid to me. I mean, I'm just being blunt about it. I said, she doesn't even understand, like, what do you mean? Okay, call a lawyer, what for? Like, totally, like, is she just playing that role? Is she really just not right? So, she said she let Dee manipulate her, and allegedly, there was some physical violence, cheating as well. But basically Dee had her locked in from selling his shit. So again, she wasn't smart for doing what she was doing, was what I got out of it. And I said, beat her. But yeah, some people, you don't believe stuff when someone tells you like something like that's going on. And so that's kind of what it was when I was talking to these people that, at first we didn't believe anything that she would have to say because it's just kind of like so far out there or whatever. But then when all of this stuff happened and then the stuff started coming out about his rap sheet, Dee's rap sheet since the arrest, that, yeah, I don't think that she was lying. Now they feel like, So, there was a couple other incidences, so that I'm trying to find to see if we can get any of these body cams, arrest reports, things that have happened that not too many people know about. So we're working on that. We talked a little bit about, well, Emma's in a situation that she's in, she's being held, Dee's being held. Do you think that, have you seen anybody that's been in a situation where they're rolling on somebody to become a CI and stuff like that? So again, that's stuff that we'll be talking about down the road here. And pretty much what came about it is that they just believe that, they believe that Dee is pretty smart, and that Emma's on his leash 1000%. They believe that she had dropped out to move actually in with him. But yeah, because Emma's family's from and lives in Moscow. And they thought that she was maybe for a second with one of the sororities when she was first in, but they were going to double check that. I said, well, are any of these sororities known for like more heavy partying than the other ones? And yeah, the Pi Phis. I said, has there been any talk about who was this target? And they didn't know anything about that. They believe they want to come forward and be speaking because of the stuff that they were told, that now it just doesn't add up from stuff that, there's stuff that's clashing. But when you ask questions, that's frowned upon on the campus. But they wanted me to 100% know. They said, whoever that WSU Kim woman is that said, she's right. We all knew that morning. Our group chats were blowing up. I remember before 9:30 a.m. I said, are you sure about 9:30? 1000%. I called out of work that day because I wanted to be with my brothers. They said they worked from this, a certain time to a certain time. And that when this person woke up to get ready, everything was already blowing up. So, and this person said there's no way they would have woken up any later than this time because they had to get ready to go to work. And then I asked, did people think it was a shooting, a stabbing? Okay, like what was being said, the Gonsalveses, they thought it was a shooting. And they said they actually did. So in my Greek circle, it went stabbing in the early morning to OD almost like it was on purpose. And my coworkers that I asked to have the day off, they said that they heard about the stabbings and the shootings too. I said, stabbing to OD. I said, what? Yeah, looking back, it's almost like they accidentally told people it was stabbings and tried to cover it up or something. It was really weird. I said, was Emma around that night? And then this is where this is where the story needs to be really told, is that on Saturday night, people weren't doing anything wild because they had everything that they were doing, you could say like wild or whatever, on Friday night with all the formals and stuff like that. Saturday was the football game, but people, it was quiet on Saturday night because of everything that was going on Friday night for the formals. And then they had, they were all pre-gaming for the football game, and they went to the football game, and there was a lower key thing on Saturday night. So Saturday night, a lot of people stayed in. Again, one of these people, they had to work. But they also know personally who the people were in the Banfield camera. I wanted to put to rest any of the like sexual orientation stuff. And again, I'll let that happen a little bit later. You have to remember I'm on Eastern Standard Time, so us kicking this off in the morning was to prep for later on this evening, and then tomorrow where you're going to be able to hear right from their own mouths. Sorry, the guy next door is building a fence. He's going to town over there. I don't know if you guys can hear that. So, let me just go ahead and play this again. I'm going to play a little bit more of this. So, immediately one of the things I think is going to be hard is, unless these people want to go ahead and lie about all of this, which I don't believe that they are. But these alleged messages and group chats and stuff like that, there has to be a paper trail of this. So if people are finding out about something at 9:30 in the morning, but the cops aren't called until almost 12, that's a that's a very, very long time. If you ask me, but it's also something that should be able to be easily proven if that was happening. So, all right, back over here to.
And it's not something you want to be good at. But
I'd like to,
as a family.
I'd like to introduce you to Joe Petito. I think it might be, helpful just in terms of the
advice from somebody who's been there for a second. Yeah, we're not.
Be pleased to do that. Shannon, we'll speak after the program, and I will connect all of you together. I do want to ask you, Steve, about some of the information in the affidavit. It seemed as though the police had their eyes on this suspect within 2 weeks of the crimes being committed, and yet for 4 more weeks, he was in Moscow, he was in Pullman, he was crossing the country. And I wanted to get your thoughts just on the notion that there were so many other people, classmates, neighbors, both in Washington and in Pennsylvania, who may have been at risk because they were so close to him before he was actually brought in cuffs. What were your thoughts about that?
I think we all kind of shared that as a community, that there was a risk of somebody being out there. And I took that very personal, because I had so much weight on top of me, and I knew all these other victims that were associated with my family were being hurt with just overall media and coverage. But these guys, there's no perfect way to do this. And these officers they just did an amazing job. And I was hard on them, and I'll come out and say that I owe them all the gratitude in the world, and I've always supported the police. But it's the school of thought that I come from. Like, everybody can do their best, and they need to come to the every day trying to be the best person that they can possibly be. So I won't back off of that, but these guys did an amazing job. They need more credit than they had. People think Idaho is so old, old fashioned and out back, but these guys, they hit a home run, man. That affidavit is impressive. And I'm glad to be wrong. I wanted to be wrong. And I told them to their face. I looked them in their eyes and said, prove me wrong, and all is forgiven. And here we are, and all is forgiven. And I was
close with with Maddie as well, this is a tremendous amount of burden to try to process for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, Maddie was very kind and had been a sister to them for so long that it was just, we took for granted that she was there and that she would always be there. So yeah, it hits everybody a little bit different, and you have certain memories that you tie to certain individuals. So it's my girls miss them both, and my son is torn. You know, it's something we're gonna have to work together. We're not very good at this kind of stuff, but we're gonna have to figure it out.
Yeah, we're not, and it's not something you want to be good at. But just
I'd like to,
as a family.
I'd like to introduce you to Joe Petito. I think it might be, helpful just in terms of the
advice from somebody who's been there first.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not.
Be pleased to do that. Shannon, we'll speak after the program, and I will connect all of you together. I do want to ask you, Steve, about some of the information in the affidavit. It seemed as though the police had their eyes on this suspect within 2 weeks. Of the crimes being committed, and yet for 4 more weeks, he was in Moscow, he was in Pullman, he was crossing the country. And I wanted to get your thoughts just on the notion that there were so many other people, classmates, neighbors, both in Washington and in Pennsylvania, who may have been at risk because they were so close to him before he was actually brought in cuffs. What were your thoughts about that?
I think we all kind of shared that as a community, that there was a risk of somebody being out there. And I took that very personal, because I had so much weight on top of me. And I knew all these other victims that were associated with my family were being hurt with just overall media and coverage. But these guys, there's no perfect way to do this. And these officers they just did an amazing job. And I was hard on them. And I'll come out and say that I owe them all the gratitude in the world, and I've always supported the police. But it's the school of thought that I come from. Like, everybody can do their best, and they need to come to the every day trying to be the best person that they can possibly be. So I won't back off of that. But these guys did an amazing job. They need more credit than they had. I mean, people think Idaho is so old-fashioned and out back, but these guys, they hit a home run, man. That affidavit is impressive. And I'm glad to be wrong. I wanted to be wrong. And I told them to their face. I looked them in their eyes and said, prove me wrong, and all is forgiven. And here we are, and all is forgiven. And I'll say that on camera, and I'll tell everybody, I was concerned, but I was wrong. They were right. And I'm okay with that. I have my person now. We have our person of interest, our defendant, and we will go after him, and he better be ready.
I can't thank you enough for spending the time with us tonight, Steve and Christy, and Shannon as well, especially on a day like you've been through today. And I send you love and strength as you embark on this journey.
Okay. The next thing is there will be a about 15-minute video going over all the people and the connections and who lived with who, when they lived with them. It's a pretty extensive, what you want to call, I don't know, web graph flow chart. But that's going to be coming up when this kicks back off here at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that is when that'll all be revealed on all the people that were in that home from last year and this year, and then who they knew. And then you guys can see where the connections are. Again, this is just research, where the research came from, and you guys can draw your own conclusions. And then a link will be dropped for those that want to speak on anything on the second part of today's marathon. So, and then tomorrow we'll be hearing from the University of Idaho themselves, Greek and student life. So, this, by the way, was done. This interview was January 6, 2023. The first interview that they did after the arrest was made of Brian Koberger. So, again, I think the biggest thing that people need to start talking about is if people are being notified at 9:30 in the morning that this happened, you know, how are people being notified, and who is doing the notifying, and why would anybody wait 2.5 hours to call the police? That's a lot. I mean, we're not just saying somebody waited 30 minutes or 15 minutes or an hour, 2.5 hours to call the police. Yeah. I mean, it's one thing if you say like you freaked out or something like that. How do you freak out for 2.5 hours? Because then the thing is that if all these other people know about something, maybe they thought the police were called, you know, the people that were notified. So it'll be interesting. But go enjoy your early afternoon, and then we will be back later on to hear from you guys and to reveal this, what I think is one of the most in-depth webs that I've ever done for any case to show the connections. So again, I appreciate all of you guys for being here. I love that the mods are here. Safe place to be, you know, able to chat respectfully. And I love that all of you guys do such a great job with that. I appreciate, you know, comments, whatever angle that you think something may be going, you have that right to say it. Just do it respectfully. That's all we ever ask for. So keep on just being respectful. Attack the argument, not the person. So looking forward to seeing you guys all this afternoon. Until then, again, be kind to one another.
Yes.
Don't forget to hit that thumbs up or thumbs down. Make yourself known.